Paul, what did you think of the PM's address just then?
I thought sold a message of reassurance. He was telling the Australian people that the government has got a plan for this challenge. This is a time when the community is going to be under pressure. But Morrison spoke, I think, in a calm and measured way, attempting to instill confidence, not to play down the magnitude of the challenge, but to argue the government did have a strategy, it did have a plan, and there were three elements to that. First of all, looking after the health of the country, the health of individuals. Secondly, jobs, the job strategy. And thirdly, working to ensure that the economy would bounce back. Overall, I thought it was an effective performance from Scott Morrison.
Paul, this is unprecedented. It's surely a massive challenge for Morrison. It comes off the back, obviously, of the bushfires over summer.
Well, it does. And I think there are a couple of points here. I think the contrast between the way he spoke to the country tonight and the way he spoke during the bushfire crisis was quite marked. I think he's learnt a lesson. During the bushfire crisis, he seemed to be a little bit desperate, a little bit over-anxious.
Jobs. And Australians in jobs.
I think we can see, quite significant
today, the World Health Organisation,
in terms of the attempted reassurance he was trying to give the Australian public.
Paul, in all your years covering politics in this country, this has got to be right up there with the challenges facing a government. I mean, you've seen governments go through GFCs, you've seen governments go through, you know, sort of crises in the late 60s, early 70s. I mean, how does this rate as far as challenges for a government of this type?
Well, this is unique. We've never seen anything like this before. This is a health virus which has got the potential to go through large sections of the community. So in that sense, we've never faced a challenge like this before, and it may well prove to be the most significant challenge that any Australian government has faced in the last half century. All the signs are that this is a really significant problem now for Europe, for the United States. It'll be very hard for Australia to quarantine ourselves, although I think we've been fairly successful to this point. And the point to make about what Scott Morrison said tonight is, okay, the fiscal stimulus he unveiled today was effective as far as it goes. But the truth is, it's likely to be swept away by a real global health crisis. And if we get that global health crisis, what that means is that business will shut down and economic activity will grind to a halt. And in one sense, if that gets particularly grievous, there's going to be very little the Australian government's package today can do about that.
Paul, do you think there's an inevitability about a recession happening?
No, I don't think it's inevitable. I think the package we saw from Scott Morrison today was very effective. Certainly on paper, it looks very good. It's a temporary package. It's a targeted package. It's about jobs. It's about investment. It's about supporting households. And it's very much geared to the next 3.5 months. It's front-end loaded. We've got a $12 billion fiscal stimulus coming in the next 3.5 months. And the Treasury estimates that that could boost the June quarter growth by an equivalent of 1.5% of GDP. Now, on paper, that looks as though it might stave off the recession, but that's on paper. And of course, what no one knows is what will be the effect of the virus on the Australian economy, what will be the effect of this health scare on the Australian economy. So it's one thing to make these assessments based on the best information we have at this stage, but it's another thing altogether to actually be able to handle the magnitude of the crisis, and frankly, no one knows what the magnitude of the crisis will be. Not Scott Morrison, not Josh Frydenberg, not the Treasury. All the government can do at this stage is to make the best estimates possible.
Paul, we saw Donald Trump impose measures including a ban on travel for 30 days from Europe, excluding the UK, $50 billion in stimulus. Now, you wrote earlier in the week in The Australian that the coronavirus and its implications, both fiscally and from a health perspective, are the wild card in the US presidential race. Now, of course, Joe Biden looks almost certain to be endorsed as the Democrat candidate. Do you believe that coronavirus could throw a wild card into that particular election?
I certainly do. Essentially today, two things happened. We saw Scott Morrison deliver a very effective fiscal stimulus in this country, and we saw Donald Trump fail as an American leader and as a global economic leader. Trump's speech today was supposed to stabilise markets. Well, it hasn't done that. And if we look at the timeline here, what happened in Australia after Trump's speech was that's when we got the downturn in the share market. I think the problem with Trump's speech today was the economic measures were too vague, they weren't substantial enough for the American economy, they weren't detailed enough, and they weren't convincing. And I think there's a real problem here. Trump has been very ineffective at handling this global health threat. He's been very ineffective as a leader in the United States. All the signs from Trump are that he's lived off a booming share market, and now the share market is in trouble. He doesn't know how to respond. He's got to rethink drastically over the next couple of days.
Paul Kelly, always a pleasure to have you on Sky News across Australia. Thank you for joining us tonight. Much appreciated.
Thank you.